Hey everybody, Steve here from The Varied Life. And in case you didn't know, a little bit of backstory. Me and the wife, we sold everything in the United States. We put stuff in a couple of suitcases and we ended up retiring early here in Korea. So, yeah, with that, whenever you live in an overseas country, or heck, even if you live in the United States, there's always going to be some ups and downs with the government or policies or, all kinds of crazy things happen. And Korea is not exempt from that. Unfortunately, what happens here in Korea is there is a doctor strike, specifically resident doctors and the Korean Medical Association, the doctors union. That kind of reminds me of the Jimmy Hoffa days and the corruption of unions to have a stranglehold on production and people and so on and so forth. I kind of get that vibe. The short story is we'll take a look and show you kind of a quick recap. And what we end up is the South Korean government ended up basically telling medical schools and the doctors union that we need more doctors. So they wanted to put two more open slots into the medical schools. So that will result in 2,000 more doctors that will be added to the 140,000 doctors that are here in Korea for about 52 million people. With this, for the last 27 years, the Korean Medical Association has rejected any call for more doctors, even though 20% of the population is aging and you need more appointments and they're being severely overworked. There's pay issues, but it's interesting because the resident doctors and the KA all work for, like, the majority of the hospitals in Korea are for-profit hospitals. So they're striking against the government saying, no, we don't need more doctors. They have gone and quoted as saying that it creates too much competition for doctors. It will be a reduction in pay and it will lessen the prestige that doctors have. Because if you have more doctors, it's almost like prestige is a tangible thing, and it's like, well, here's all the prestige that we have, and if you only have so much to give out, and if we have more doctors, then we have to give less prestige to everybody else, and we don't want that. Yeah, that's what they're saying. It's insane. So about 10 or 12,000 resident doctors and other doctors in the Korean Medical Association have gone on strike, and they've walked out of the hospitals. They turned in their letters of resignation saying, we're complaining about long working hours, 100, 120 hours a week, 36-hour shifts. We only spend, 3-4 minutes per patient. We see up to 100 patients or more a day. And so the government says, hey, well, let's get some more doctors to alleviate some of this overburden. The doctors union says, no, we don't want more doctors. And for the last 27 years, I kid you not, last 27 years, they have rejected any new doctors. And they say that all of these doctors will crash the medical system and whatever. So since February 20th, about 90% of the 13,000 trainee doctors have joined the strike to increase the number of medical school seats by 2,000 due to a shortage of doctors in Korea. Now, the thing about this, it's absolutely true. It's to the breaking point of where you're working 36-hour shifts and all that overwork. You need more doctors. Unfortunately, the KMA has not been good at providing any solutions. They say they want better pay and they want better working conditions. Then why are you striking against the government that wants to give more doctors to help alleviate the overwork that you have? And by the way, if you're working for the big five hospitals, and there's like 100 training hospitals, but the big five hospitals, and the majority of these hospitals are for-profit endeavors, why don't you strike against them, and why are you striking against the government? That doesn't make sense. It's you should be striking against the people that pay you because you're not getting paid enough. That's kind of what unions do, is they go to their employer. So yeah, it's this real weird dynamic. And they say that, the striking medical community argues that such a drastic increase in medical schools will basically undermine the quality of medical education and related services, resulting in higher costs for patients. And I've seen other quotes by spokespeople for the union saying that, oh, if we have 2,000 more doctors, that'll result in destroying the medical system. It will be a reduction in the quality of care that we give to people. And it's like, well, wait a second. You're a resident doctor, or you're a doctor now. You got your pre-med degree. You went to medical school. Then you did your residency and you're supervised and you took your board certifications and, crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, and boom, you became a full-fledged doctor in that specialty. By adding 2,000 more out of the 40 some odd, medical schools in Korea, they're going to have their pre-med degree. They're going to go to medical school. They're going to do their residency. They're going to pass their board certification. So tell me, how is their quality of care going to be less? You see what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense. Some of these spokesmen have actually said that this huge influx of doctors will destroy the medical system that we have in Korea. Let's put it into perspective. When you have 2,000 medical students that are going to do residency, they say, oh, it's just too huge of an influx. And it's like, well, wait a second. There's 100 teaching hospitals. So 2,000 divided by 100, you end up with like 20 doctors per teaching hospital, additional doctors. You have 10, 15, 20 different departments in a hospital. So realistically, you would see maybe one or two additional resident doctors in the hospital. How is that going to destroy the medical system? That it doesn't make sense. I have some good insight into this because our daughter is a doctor. And she went through residency and all that stuff and the long hours. But here in Korea, it is even worse. But they always complain about how they have to work too many hours. They don't get a lot of time off. If a doctor gets sick or has to take time off or somebody passes or whatever it is, the current staff of resident doctors have to cover that. And so it results in longer work hours. It's just absolutely insane. So the main thing that I've seen all residents say would help them immensely is having more staff, is having more residents so they could spread out the overburden of work that they have. So I really just don't get how the KMA is saying that, it'll resort in lower quality of care, higher costs for patients. Well, you're working for a for-profit hospital. So your pay considerations and all these things about higher costs need to be directed to the for-profit hospital, in my opinion. They're also calling to address measures of underpaid specialists and improve legal protection against excessive medical malpractice lawsuits, which, if that is true, then yes, absolutely. There are specialists like pediatricians, emergency medicine doctors, emergency room, things like that a lot of people don't want to go into because the pay isn't good enough. And so people go and take the specialties of where they get paid more. So that needs to be addressed with the for-profit hospital because they're the ones that are paying you. So now does the government need to subsidize that but the government here in Korea is actually saying, hey, we're going to put money into this, something like $7.4 million or whatever, to address some of these issues and to get more doctors in rural areas and towns and cities where there's not a lot of doctors. And, that's a valid complaint. But it's absolutely insane because of the strike and the reasons. Here it is. South Korea has not increased medical school seats in 27 years and is one of the OECD countries with the lowest number of doctors per inhabitants, ranked behind Mexico, Poland, Colombia, and Turkey. And actually, there are some other articles that I've read that said, well, it's like Mexico and Turkey, and then Korea's like third. So either way, it's the bottom of the barrel when of all the developed countries. Now, Is Turkey really a developed country? I don't think so. So we get into this, and another thing that the striking doctors and the spokespeople for the doctors union has said that, we don't have the government says we need more doctors because of the increasing aged population, need more appointments. And again, when you look at the stats of, working and seeing over 100 patients a day, spending only 3 or 4 minutes per patient, could something be missed in that short amount of time? Yes. It just seems like it's a turnstile. It's just kind of like a busy train station, buy your ticket, go, get your medication, go, do all of this stuff. It's really to the point of where they need more doctors. But yeah, it is just insane. Now, here's another thing that my wife heard on the Korean news about this doctor strike is the doctors union says it will destroy the medical, system that we have. And there's no way on God's green earth that we could, have 2,000 more medical school seats open. And here's the reason they gave. We just can't do it. It's impossible. There's not enough cadavers. Case closed. There's not enough cadavers. And I'm like, people are dying like every single day. And I just find it so crazy that they're complaining about work conditions. They're complaining about pay. They're complaining about all of these things, but they don't want any more doctors. Well, why don't they want any more doctors? Because that would result in the for-profit hospitals having to pay more, so their bottom line isn't as good as it was before. They want to shuttle as many people as possible into these hospitals, kind of like cattle, so they can make a big buck, but they don't want to put out any more money to have more doctors. Yes, if you have more doctors, you'll have to do a slight increase for services. It's a thing. It happens around the world in every developed country. But when you have the lowest doctor to patient ratio in the world of developed nations, you need to get with the program. So anyway, we got that going on. It's just absolutely crazy. Not enough cadavers. It's just not enough cadavers. It's just crazy. The government medical community clash over international labor rules. So now the striking doctors are saying, this is international labor rules and laws, and they're forcing us to work. So this is another case where they're saying basically, the Korean Intern Resident Association of trainee doctors claim that the government's order violates the International Labor Organization's conventions that bans forced labor. And there's a law on the books here in Korea that says, well, if there's a serious impact on the health of the Korean people as a whole, then yeah, they can be made or ordered to go back to work. In this regard, they sent a letter asking the UN agency to intervene in the ongoing doctor-government conflict in Korea. In contrast, the government defended its directives as justifiable measure by citing exceptions in the ILO rules, arguing that doctors' walkout posed a threat to public safety, thus necessitating such an action. Now, this is really interesting because you have like 12 or 13,000 trainee doctors, residents who walked off the job. The government responds by saying, hey, you need to come back by a certain time. They didn't. They remained on strike. They said, well, the next round of volleys going back and forth is the government says we're going to suspend your license for 3 months, which if you suspend the license of a resident doctor for 3 months, they have to redo that year of residency. Nobody wants that. But apparently it's in the mind of these resident doctors and the doctors union. Kind of reminds me of the Jimmy Hoffa days in the unions, is we're going to hold fast and we're going to stick to our guns regardless of what happens to the people in the union, the small peons that are doing the striking. Does the KMA really care about the people that they're influencing to strike? I don't think so. If they end up getting suspended, is the KMA going to help these resident doctors? In a worst case scenario, if these resident doctors have fines to pay or if they get their license suspended for life, do you think that the KMA, the doctors union, is going to pay their student loans for medical school? Absolutely not. So again, we've got this weird dynamic going on. And it has posed a public threat to safety of the Korean people. So you have the government over here wanting more doctors. You have the Korean union saying, we don't want more doctors. We don't have enough cadavers. We don't have enough prestige. It would create too much competition amongst the doctors, and it would result in poor quality of care and blah, blah, blah. Complain about the working conditions and the long hours, but they don't want more doctors. The interesting thing is that the medical union I have yet to see any workable solution to say, okay, well, you're being overworked, you're working all these hours, 36-hour shifts, you work 6 days a week and all this stuff, you barely have enough time to breathe. What is a workable solution to alleviate this overburden without having more doctors? What's interesting is in the Korean media, the news media, no one asks those questions. Sometimes you need to look at the questions that are not being asked and who's in bed with whom. Interesting. And how the for-profit hospitals, where all of these doctors primarily work, how come they're just kind of sitting back and they're just, they're not saying anything? If the for-profit hospital is paying me and I feel that I'm underpaid, I don't strike against the government. I should strike against the for-profit hospital. Again, there's questions that you need to ask, and it's just a big mess over here for right now. So the latest clash is 90% of the doctors comprising the majority of care is just kind of gutted the hospitals. So anyway, the ILO Convention number 29, known as Forced Labor Convention, stipulates a member country suppress the use of forced or compulsory labor in all its forms. The government should immediately stop mobilizing state power to threaten training doctors and force them back to work. It's the government disagrees, citing the exception clauses in the convention, which is really interesting. So I read this whole thing out, and it's like, it states forced or compulsory labor does not include any work or service exacted in cases of war or calamity and in general circumstances that would endanger the existence or well-being of the whole or part of the population. So the health minister and, of course, the government of Korea has said, well, look at the people that aren't getting the emergency surgeries that they need. Look at the people that are not getting their cancer treatments. Look at the people that aren't getting this and that. Look at the people that are dying from cardiac arrest and stroke that are not being treated because these doctors who make up the majority of the workforce just kind of said, we're not coming into work. Hippocratic oath be damned. There are news reports over and over again on how people are dying and how people are not getting treated, and it is a health disaster. There was a case that we talked about, as reported, where a lady had a cardiac arrest. She went to one hospital. They turned her away because everybody's on strike. She goes to another hospital. She went to 7 hospitals. 7. And the 7th one wasn't good because she died. And so the Korean people themselves and people like myself, foreigners who reside in Korea for whatever reason, are being held hostage between the doctors' union and the government. But the thing is when you look at the history of the doctors' union for the last 27 years, they don't want any more doctors. They got their head stuck in the sand, and they have this confirmational bias of where they say, they pick and choose the information that they want that supports their cause. So, for example, when a reporter asks and says, there's the why do you feel that you need to go on strike? And so the doctors union will say, well, here's the reason why. We don't, the birth rate in Korea is extremely low, so we don't need more doctors. Okay, that's true, but they neglect to tell you and totally won't bring up anything about the aging population and the ever-increasing need for more medical services and appointments for the aging. I'm a senior, and I need more medical appointments, and I'm in fairly good condition. There's a lot of people that aren't. And so they just pick and choose the information that supports their cause, and they just don't want to look at, no, I don't want to look at the 20% of the aging population. No, I don't want to look at all of this stuff that we're being overworked to the point of where we're doing 36-hour shifts or seeing over 100 patients a day, and we're only spending 3 minutes per patient. But we're being overworked, but we don't want more doctors. Yeah, it's just kind of crazy. So now they're trying to get the UN into this and this International Labor Organization. But again, the Korean people as a whole are the ones that are suffering. But it gets better. Okay, there's even more suffering going around, and South Korea's major hospitals suffer operational losses due to the doctor strike. Yeah, facing financial challenge during the resident doctor strike, major hospitals in South Korea are taking emergency measures to overcome the crisis. This is interesting. Seoul National University Hospital and Asan Medical Center began accepting applications for unpaid leave for nurses and staff starting on March 4th. So in other words, they're bleeding red. And so now they're saying, hey, unpaid leave, now's a good time if you want to take an unpaid vacation, because of the strike, because we can't pay. Oh, yeah, we're the ones that pay because we're for profit. But, so now more staff are leaving. This was done in an effort to cut labor costs because the number of hospitalized and surgical patients has been reduced by half because of the strike and residents and interns. The losses have exceeded 1 billion won or $762,000 per day. You don't tell me that these for-profit hospitals are not going to see, some bumps in the road at, half? Seriously? Yeah, that's just huge. Only 2 weeks after the absence of doctors and interns, two of Seoul's Big Five hospitals, Seoul National and Asan Medical Center, have already started emergency management. And this is going to go to other hospitals as well. This is causing concern among the medical community. While national university hospitals can receive government supports to cover deficits, private university hospitals and private major hospitals must issue bonds to refund their operational costs. Oh, man, this is having some fallout. It's just absolutely crazy. Excuse me. So now this is going to affect the economy of the recession that we're in, and this is going to have far-reaching effects. One insider from major hospital in the nation stated the financial difficulties are so severe that something must be done to save the hospitals. What about saving the people that are dying because they're not getting care? The Hippocratic Oath thing. The medical industry points out that this situation has revealed the vulnerable financial reality of top-tier general hospitals in the nation. And again, all the government wants is more doctors, and they pledge to kind of help out with the pay of specialties that don't get a lot of doctors, that are in higher demand, especially in rural areas and smaller towns and cities. They want to inject a bunch of money and help in that endeavor, but the doctors union says, no, we will never. And they said that is one thing that they will not negotiate, is getting more doctors. Absolutely not. So we're at an impasse now. So now this ripple effect of this strike is going into the financial sectors. It's going to have, it's going to ding the hard-pressed economy that we have even more. And with this recession and the rising of goods and services, this is going to reach out into the financial sector. Imagine this: if you've got your money into the stock market and the big chaebols and the it's huge. It's kind of like the mafia families who run everything, but the big families in Korea that kind of control everything. Your money is trying to make money off of how well that they do. Well, now this strike is spilling over into that aspect, so we're probably going to see a dip in the stock market, and we're going to see some losses, and people are going to lose their asses. And as usual, it's most likely going to end with the Korean people. They're the ones that are going to get bent over, the everyday working people. Excuse me. Main reason for this financial shortfall cited is high dependency on residents in Korea's major hospitals. Representative of Samsung Seoul Hospital said every single surgery involves at least 6 to 8 people, including the surgeon and nurses and all those other people. In general hospitals with more than 100 beds, half of the medical revenue goes to labor costs. Even the big 5 hospitals with better operating conditions than others spend about 40% of their medical revenue on labor costs. Representative of Severance Hospital mentioned the rate of increase in fees, money given to the hospital by the Health Insurance Review and Assessment, cannot keep up with the rate of wage increases. There's going to be a time of where there's going to have to be an increase for the cost of medical care in Korea. That it's especially with an ever-aging population. Now it's compounded with the strike that we see. It's just something that's going to happen. It's kind of like expecting, I want the prices of 1950s, United States, and I want to go back to that time. Well, of course, everybody wants to go back to that time, but we can't. And life is, there's only 2 things, death and taxes and kind of expenses, and things will go up in price. You can sometimes get around not paying taxes, but there will always be an increase on goods and services, and we see that in the United States. We see it in foreign countries. And even though the expenses are still low here in Korea versus the United States, and that's the reason why we retired here, you're always going to have some increases. So anyway, that's what we got going on with this strike. And it continues on. Now, the Korean government has issued an ultimatum and said, hey, if you need to return back to work, no questions asked to these resident doctors. If you do, great. We won't hold it against you. But the next volley is the Korean doctors union says, nope, we're standing fast. We're not gonna budge. We're all gonna stand in solidarity and strike against the government for wanting more doctors for the last. Come on, who needs more doctors? In the last 27 years, we don't need those stinking doctors. That is just such an unrealistic view. Costs in goods and services goes up, ever-aging population increases the number of appointments that they're seeing to the point of where they're at the breaking point. But we don't want more doctors. Again, it's kind of crazy on what we end up seeing with this. In that picture right there that we see, that's kind of busy, but that's not busy. It's even worse. Matter of fact, yesterday I just went to Samsung Medical Center for appointments, and it ends up that, walking through the halls is like walking through a crowded bus or train station, Grand Central Station during rush hour. The problem is there's still a lot of people walking the hallways, but when you get to the actual departments, it's about half of what they normally look like. And that's because of the doctor strike. And it's like, so there's still some doctors that are working. I got follow-up care on my surgery for my eyes and so on and so forth, which has thankfully been a good thing. I got to go back in 6 months and then another 6 months and I should be done. Hopefully I won't need any other medical work. But there's about half the number of people going to ophthalmology. You could still get the eye tests and this and that, and they had staff that would do that. But the amount of doctors that they have is obviously less. And it was just almost like a ghost town. It was that noticeable. But you go back into the hallways and there's still a ton of people. But obviously it's affecting the care, and the people that are getting the brunt of this are the public, the Korean people and people like myself and my wife and people who live here. They're the ones that are paying the price for this strike. So whether you agree with the doctors union, which in my opinion, if you have complaints about pay and pay raises and work conditions, then bring that up with the hospital whom you work for, not against the government. So there's this whole political thing going on, and the fact that the Korean Doctors Union has its tentacles so far that 46% of the medical school students have dropped out and stopped going to school. That kind of, seriously, really? And if you don't go to medical school, then the mandatory military service here in Korea is 18 months. So now the government's saying, well, if you're not going to medical school and you turned in your resignation, it's in the Army now. You need to do your military service instead of continue on with your medical school and then becoming a resident doctor and then doing your military time in a military hospital and then going back and being a civilian doctor. No, they want to throw that all the way. So I am just amazed at the length of which these resident doctors are willing to fall on their sword to the point of where they could get fired. They could get fined $22,000. They could even go to jail, and they could get their licenses revoked for good. So if you go and you have all this student debt because you went to be a doctor and then now you can't be a doctor, you're still responsible for those student loans, what job are you going to get? In the long game, in the worst case scenario, is the Korean Medical Association going to pay those student loans? Absolutely not. Are they going to pay your rent, your mortgage? Are they going to, what's going to happen when, bad health happens to everybody? So let's say you're a resident doctor, you went on strike because you're standing in solidarity, and some family members in your immediate family or extended family had to go to the hospital and they died because of a lack of care. That's going to get really awkward during the holidays when everybody gets together and talks and drinks and how are you going to explain that to your here's the resident doctor who went on strike and people died in their own family and how is that going to, that's going to be really awkward. And again, the Korean people are the everyday working people are the one that are bearing the brunt of this. So now, the doctors' union is trying to say it's slave labor, but there is a drastic decrease in surgeries and medical care to the point of where it is killing people and resulting in the deaths of many people and the lack of care. So with the doctors, in normal times, has the lowest doctor-to-patient ratio. And now basically, 40% of the working staff or, depending on which hospital you go to, a lot of these resident doctors provide up to, 70, 80, even 90% of the work that's being done. What is the doctor-patient ratio now? Now you're getting to the point where you were at the bottom of the barrel of developed countries in that ratio. Now all of them are gone. Now you're looking into third world doctor-patient ratios. That's going to have a detrimental effect to the health and welfare of the citizens of Korea and the foreigners who live here. I just don't get it. And the hospitals are starting to see red. It's going to be interesting because how much can they bleed before the for-profit hospitals kind of step in and say, okay, doctors union, you need to negotiate this a little bit. We need some more doctors because we can't hemorrhage all of this money. But they're going to try to, seems like the for-profit hospitals kind of had some influence with the doctors union and vice versa, whatever it is. But eventually there's going to come a breaking point to where the red that these businesses face, if the government doesn't bow to this unnegotiable or non-negotiable, we won't ever hire more doctors or get more medical school openings ever, that's non-negotiable. Eventually there's going to come a point of where it's going to bleed so much red in these businesses that they're going to say, okay, stop it, we're losing too much money. And then who's going to want to buy a bond to, what I'm saying? It's like, that I wouldn't buy any bonds like that. That doesn't make any sense. Not at the point of where this is climaxed and it's such a bad place and time. I don't think government bonds are going to do it. I don't think, these bonds at these hospitals to recoup some of these losses, trying to get an influx of money coming into the business. you're betting that things are going to. I just don't see it, and we're in a recession. So really, yeah, for the average investor, I don't think that would be a good play. In my opinion, I wouldn't put money in it. But then I'm not a big investor. I'm just a lowly little retired guy here in Korea. So that's what we got going on. Interesting information. Again, some of the excuses. Oh, we don't have enough cadavers to accommodate. Oh, adding 2,000 more doctors would destroy the medical system. It's in reality, it's like 1 or 2 doctors per department. Really, is that going to crush? Oh, it'll be a decreased quality of care. You still go to the same degree, same medical school, same certifications, same residency program. Explain to me how that happens. I don't understand that. But again, a lot of these things, a lot of questions that are not being asked need to be asked, but they're not by the media or the news organizations. And that just caused me to go, why is that? Why aren't they asking the hard questions? Why aren't the news media and the representatives that we see on TV asking the doctors union and saying, okay, well, how do you specifically, if you're not going to get more doctors, how specifically, what actions would you take to reduce the overwork and overburden of these resident doctors? Give me a plan. Start with number 1, 2, 3, 4. Give me a list of things that you would do to alleviate this overburden. Nothing. Zip, zero. Nobody has offered any workable solutions. All they do is just repeat the same mantra of, oh, we don't need medical doctors. We don't need doctors. We don't need doctors. And they've been doing the same thing for the last 27 years. So obviously there's some money involved. There's corruption. There's unions and Jimmy Hoffa-esque type of things going on. And the Korean people are paying for it with their lives and not getting treatment. In other words, it's going into third world status. And the severity of what this will cause the Korean people, it just kind of astounds me. This is kind of interesting because people have asked me, you're going to regret living in Korea. And it's like, no, even with this problem here, I don't regret it. It allowed me to retire early. So, my wife's Korean. She has Korean ancestry. Her wife's family's over here. They're awesome. Korean people as a whole are just incredible people. The first time I came to Korea was in 1988, just prior to the 88 Olympics. And I just fell in love with it. They're hardworking people. They're honest for the most part. Don't have to worry about crime. It's just great. I just really enjoyed my time in the military over here, and then we came back because we found out that we could retire here, so we don't regret that. With that being said, you always got to have a plan B. So whether, if things become unmanageable here in Korea, there's other countries that you can go to retire and pay less expenses. Whether that's Philippines or Thailand or some European countries or South America. I'm not a big fan of South America personally because of the corruption and crime and ever increasing corruption and crime and corruption. That's just kind of off the list for me personally. And then there's some other considerations, but there are other countries that we can go to. So with that being said, nothing is a home run, ever. Even in the United States. It used to be that, you work hard and you'll be able to retire and have some golden years in the United States. Well, the majority of people are not able to do that. And most seniors that are getting ready to step into retirement or should be able to step into retirement are saying, yeah, I can't afford it. So again, the choice of retiring overseas and experiencing some bumps and bruises and hurdles that you need to jump that far outweighs staying in the United States and working until you die, in my opinion. So, it is. The world is ever changing, and things can change at a drop of a hat. Whether it's a doctor strike, eventually this will come to a head and something will happen and things will get back to some form of normalcy. If it doesn't, then we'll go to another country. I don't regret that. There's some great times that we've had here. We're still having great times for the most part. Now, if I needed life-saving surgery and couldn't get it and died, then obviously, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Would probably go to another country before that happens, or if that happened, try to get transferred. But again, it's all, there's no guarantee in life. So you need to make the best with what you have and run it with that. But the fact that the doctors union here, and I will go out and say that they have brainwashed these resident doctors to the point of rejecting wanting any more doctors for the last 27 years. There's an ulterior motive. And if you follow the money, usually that will point you into the direction of why they don't want more doctors. And they've come out and said it will lessen the pay of doctors if we have more doctors. Yeah, if you have the same amount of money that is allocated, and say you have X amount of money for X amount of doctors regardless, so if you have more doctors, you're going to get less pay. Yeah, absolutely, that's true. But there's always going to be a rise in increase of goods and services. So when was the last time the doctors got a pay raise? The residents got a pay raise? I can't find it anywhere, but it seems like it's been a long time. But to use that as an item to strike against the government who wants more doctors, they're striking against the wrong organization. They should be striking against the for-profit hospitals in which they work, but they don't. So why is the Korean Medical Association and the unions, who are they in bed with, and why aren't they protesting and striking against for-profit hospitals? Maybe because the for-profit hospitals and the chaebols that are involved that run everything here in Korea are in bed with the KMA so they can minimize their expenses that they don't want to pay so they can stay in the black. Maybe there's some greed involved. Maybe there's a little bit of corruption. I don't know. I just kind of get that vibe. So we'll see what happens. So anyway, be sure to like and subscribe to The Varied Life. We'll kind of update you as things go on. But the last thing that the Korean government said is it's drawing up the paperwork to suspend the licenses of 4,900 resident doctors. Now keep in mind, these resident doctors walked off the job and turned in their letters of resignation to the hospitals, but the hospitals haven't done anything with them. Again, why are the hospitals remaining silent? It's kind of like they're just, don't bring us into this. As I'm coughing. But now the hospitals are seeing red. At that one hospital, a reduction of profit of $762,000 a day. Yeah, they're starting to say, hey, take some free leave or whatever. Ooh, it's going to be interesting. How far are we going to go? How far are we going to toe the line and say, oh, yeah, go ahead and strike against the government? Something's going to break. But unfortunately, the victims and the people who are being hurt are the Korean people themselves, the everyday working people. So have you seen anything like this in the United States or in the country where you live in the past, present, recent, ever? In any other country, I just don't get it. And the fact that they're so low on the doctor to patient ratio on a good day before the strike, and now that half of the staff walks out, and now there's even the medical school professors who are doctors and licensed are saying, hey, we're just going to walk off the job too in solidarity with our brothers and sisters. That is going to put the medical schools, it's going to floor them. It's going to level them. It's going to ruin them. Along with more Korean people not being treated or supervised, doctors being supervised, and then there's the whole outcast and, you're going back to work, well, you're going to be an outcast. Do you think that the doctors who do have a brain come back and want to fulfill the oath that they made to put the patient's needs first? Do you think maybe the KMA will have some influence so that their ratings and evaluations won't be as high as what they should be because they crossed the picket line? That they won't get the promotion? Yeah, it is crazy on what's going on. So with that said, that's interesting stuff. We'll keep you apprised on what's going on. Be sure to like and subscribe to The Varied Life, and we'll see you on the next video. Peace. Not enough cadavers.